I reviewed Mewgenics to stop myself playing more Mewgenics. To quickly summarize my journey, I have a 200-hour save file that managed to complete the true ending of the game at around the 160-hour mark. The remaining 40 hours are all from trying to beat Act 3 in hard mode. My friends know this has been tolling on my sanity, and as someone that enjoys their single-player strategy games one at a time, I need something to finally tell me it's okay to move on to my next one in the library, which is Menace. It's the reason why this review exists. It's for me to make Mewgenics stop taking over my free time entirely. Please note, I'm not a very serious YouTuber. This channel is lazily unkempt with whims and not for the numbers. I didn't try to make this video very stimulating. Mewgenics is a lengthy labor of love. It's a tactics game that has hours of promised fun and adventure. I only wish it wasn't ridden with outdated design choices for game design in both balance and function that can be found every so often as the playthrough goes on. Note that I want to preface that I actually think this is an amazing game. It's a 7.5 out of 10 for me, and I think it's actually an easy 9 plus for the masses. But I have found a need to express how frustrating this game can be by modern standards. Ultimately, these are all entirely nitpicks, but when you adore a game as well as the tactics genre as deeply as I do, one cannot help but feel it just needs a few more touches to be that much better. Thankfully, some of my critiques that I kept writing down as I played did get fixed in patches, but that is only a few.
You know what's about to happen.
I think I need to kill him myself.
The first section I'm going to talk about is rule inconsistency. Typically, there are bodies that stay on a tile after the unit's health is reduced to 0. These bodies can be interacted with, such as being knocked around like a ball for damage or conductors of elements. What doesn't make sense to me are units that explode from ever leaving behind a KO'd body because either they're a unit too small to have one, like bugs, or the level of overkill simply evaporates them to ever even having a corpse. There's quite the confusion to seeing a non-corpse invisibly collide with something because knockback was involved, but there is nobody to show for it as it exploded before it got shifted. Visually, the corpse is removed and before these moments even get to finish. Getting down should be considered different to being deleted, but I guess not for rules like these? An ability that creates a familiar/a friendly unit will need an adjacent tile. Not all, such as the Spawn Pooter friend, which allows the spawned unit to be 2 tiles away from the summoner, and it can be cast past line of sight. However, despite this difference, if all tiles are surrounding the summoner, it can no longer be cast. There are icons that will be on the top left of a spell/ability border that signify an aspect or keyword associated with it, such as elemental attribution or type, like songs, gravity, fire, etc. You cannot see your current cat's inventory nor character pages while in the shop. Not having this feature means certain shop purchases debates are harder to make because you cannot verify if the purchase is worth your current team. Also, some enemy descriptions, diseases, and disorders that are missing information, such as COVID and bird flu are contagious, but to my sudden surprise, toxoplasmosis was spread by my cleric healing the cat with it. Unfortunately, this means that it was inevitably going to make my entire team be diseased with toxoplasmosis for the rest of the run. I also personally wish there was more numbers given for the RNG moments that occur, not like a dice has to flash on screen showing the results, but being able to know what ratio, percentage, or how unlikely something occurred for better or worse. That's a chance to make statistics feel fun, or even better eternalized, because sometimes it just feels like an event or similar happened, and therefore, get fucked me, I guess. As you play along, acquiring new knowledge, new interactions, or whatever potential synergies you discover along the way, all the levels of depth this game has is fine and good. Rerolling is tied to the jester, or equipment, or disorders. That being said, I wish there was a progression found to alleviate the times when all 4 choices suck dookie on a level up. And what I mean by at least a way, I mean just a single one of the 4 choices get rerolled, not how the other previously mentioned points that are presently established will do it.
Nice.
86 minutes.
86 enemies ran away.
The next main subject is low investment and high time sinks. There are 2 resources tied to your house, both able to be collected for storage back at home after a successful run. Neither of them truly needs to be managed nor budgeted. Food will never be critically low and instead be constantly overfilled to the point it's never thought about again. Cats at home do not change their eating habits so that they could consume less or more than another, as well as there are no trades that use this resource outside of consumption. Even at crazy cat levels of hoarding them, food does not dwindle significantly fast enough to ever worry about it. Money in the beginning will be somewhat sought after, but this too becomes a non-resource that begins to stockpile with little to siphon the profit. It's strange too that there is a 99 coin limit to what can be brought home after a run, so one would think this wouldn't be encountered for this critique. However, the two shops that are available struggle to have relevancy. The furniture shop can be easily bought out of stock at a certain point from the early game, and the other shop sells food which is useless, and stocks items that are hardly justifiable for a purchase. They also only stock once a week, making the player visit them less. Item storage is the one I have to wrestle with the most, as even with 2 storage size upgrades, I am constantly throwing things into the trash with no way to sell them off or salvage them into furniture. The sheer amount of cats required to send to homes is a giant tedious number slog. You only obtain, at best, 4 cats to bring home after an adventure. These cats then become designated as home defense or progression towards an upgrade. The time it takes to reach the total upgrades after their second level is ridiculously large in amount for some, with conditions tied to being a viable send towards another home. It's especially annoying to know that Bruce, the one that wants several battle experience cats, will ask for these high number of cats, which means you need several runs to succeed his demand. These runs can take at minimum an hour, which when these hours add up, even assuming it goes perfectly for these runs, is just long. It's especially awkward when some upgrades feel ultimately a waste of time to do so. Item storage feels much more important than having more food storage. There is no reason to care about cats. Feeling a personal bond to cats is fleeting. Ultimately, the adventure happens and they retire. You can note some details about them, but invested interaction with them serves no purpose. When you send them away to another home, you'll never see them again in those said homes roaming about, nor hear if their new owners have anything to say about them. When you have them at home, they can't be directly favored with treats, nurtured, or even abused/neglected, which both is in flavor of the game's tone. There are furniture and home stat mechanics that exist, all to encourage breeding and lineage, but no way to make certain cats get affected by these than the rest, or even feel like some of them can be special than others. Somehow, a game with cute pet cats is turned into statistics and numbers. I'm not asking for the same level of Nintendo's pet games, but I am asking for better reasons to see these cats to be more than just temporary memories. Having to decipher the hoarder mentality of what rooms look like is hellish. I really wish there was a way to visually represent which furnitures do what, other than having to hover over each individual piece. And I understand that they can have multiple different stats, but having a heat map type of tile visual to know which furniture is comfort, which ones are simulation, etc., would make furniture organization less tedious. There's a fun counteraction mechanic to save scumming, which I won't spoil too deeply, but I want to identify the lack of having the player be able to temporarily close out the game in the middle of battle if something requires them to not continue play. Real life sometimes interrupts, and the only way to allow the battle to stay in its current state is to leave it idle in the background. The game allows for one safe save scum, but it doesn't allow for one periodic pause in time, which would allow the player to come back later, which is not the same as save scumming. Think of it as suspended data in Fire Emblem. I think it's pretty clear how certain team compositions or specific classes either range from required to a liability. One can't help but notice that there isn't just much reason to take some classes over the other. Niche scenarios and certain quests change this at times, but when you're looking to progress typical runs, you'll always be looking at the Butcher, the Necromancer, and the Cleric.
Holy fucking shit! 15 rounds!
Wow, I wish there was a better and consistent support class than the Cleric. The last section I'm going to be talking about is the real meat and potatoes, battle mechanics. One may notice that the player's cats spawn in facing the camera and not actually towards the general masses of where enemies are coming from. This is especially dangerous if you happen to be already in range of attacks off turn start, because getting hit from behind increases the damage one takes on top of the chance of being critically hit. This is especially noticeable in later stages with more powerful enemies that can consistently do something threatening in the beginning of battle, and you can potentially start off with your entire team injured more than necessary. Speaking of facing, to turn the face of a player's cat is to select any tile relative to that cat, or if it is an ability hovering a tile. We have several tactics games that circumvent this issue that are even older, such as Final Fantasy Tactics. Players cannot face towards the walls or the outer sections, which are out of bounds, outside of the base playing field, which can cause another loss of agency for AI targeting the back manipulation or moves, passives, and equipment that matter based on the direction being faced. such as the PUBG frying pan, or pooping, or jolting, etc. This one is somewhat fixable with going into your settings and then choosing targeting empty tiles requires double click. Whether it be that you were hovering the confirmation of a move or had a slight misclick to the adjacent tile of what was intended, you can potentially waste an action completely. I get there is a point to be able to use moves that hit empty tiles because of terrain interactions like elements, but there are other abilities that will have zero interaction at all other than making it just have contact with the unit. A player should be punished for whiffing and wasting mana, but a player being punished for visual clarity is my issue. It also doesn't help that the UI of the ability bar on the bottom left can be prioritized over the battlefield when doing an already queued action. I've had it where the click hitbox of a cat I was clearly on top of was just on the top right of the 5th ability on the bar. Having tooltips bubbles appear above while trying to look at some information by darkly hovering a unit on the field obstructs vision. You have to go from this natural way to hover info to going to the timeline on the top right just to read information uninterrupted. During battle, you can, on hold of a button, turn the grid into a flatter game board-like visual. Outside of this, you will have to decipher visual clutter to see if certain things do or do not exist, like units or pickups on the ground behind giant models. It is especially annoying to have to understand the playing field when these large fumbling moving pieces cover up an action that is essentially a blind spot for the isometric camera. Other modern games assuage this by having a slight transparent bubble layering effect that lets the player see things behind something. Acquiring a cursed equipment onto a cat, or at least having one in your inventory, is where the depth lies there. I have only encountered a single random event that removes cursed parasite equipment off a cat. Aside from other equipment that will allow you to remove other cursed equipment besides themselves, you'll be stuck with that curse forever, which normally should be the case of incurring consequences, but this leaves a shallow interaction between the player and curses. Water and water and water, water. This one, or which one?
The black one.
Acquiring kittens and strays are all left to the whims of numbers and statistics, but with very little attention needed to give either acquiring more cats or when it just comes down to a time cycle. Kittens may inherit a random piece of their parents' ability skill set and stat spread, with mutations feeling more guaranteed due to inbreeding or negative traits. But this is all left to staring at the screen and just seeing things happen. One of the houses that we know of is a lab. Surely we could have included ways of payment or experimentation to try surgery, treatment, or amputation with these many curses and deformities. Even having the other houses who say they're interested in cats to babysit or take care of cats in their own way, potentially letting them be temporarily grown outside of the player in ways of adding personality and RNG depth. I imagine the other citizens, by their characterization, could raise a cat in their own ways. After a certain point of levels, you no longer gain the option to take an ability plus, but instead just a flat +1 with no full heal. This also makes solo leveling cats less interesting. You do not have full agency on what tiles your unit will take for their movement. This is especially annoying when there are hazardous tiles, traps, or other things that the player may want to avoid. I have noticed that it does attempt to avoid hazards if you have a high speed stat to naturally and automatically go around, but this minor exception doesn't matter when there are invisible traps that are memorized by the player. Or in general, going to an unoptimal tile with remaining tiles that could have been just used to not touch a specific tile route. This is still something that should be available for strategy tactic games. Related to this, there are limited button functions. The controls you see are the controls you get. There are games out there with some buttons to allow extra agency, like the aforementioned pathing issue, or to quick select abilities from left to right. Abilities that can be used from a unit range from 1 to 5, like on your numbers. I really wish I could use my number buttons respectively for these moves, weapons, etc., similar to other modern comparisons, like Slay the Spire.
Do you think this is what's happening inside my body right now?
Holy shit. Thank you, Edward McMillan, for giving cancer patients the representation they deserve in video games. I'm so glad you thought of this.
So many of them.
There are straight up some battles you don't get to do anything to fight back. I'm not talking about the player not reading an enemy unit of its text like the shark. I'm talking some enemies will get to enact bullshit upon thee and you lose by existing. At a certain point, you will run into enemies who do not vary in their actions and will always use the same move. I ran into a room that had 4 units who could charm. One of those 2 was an elite variant that had 2 turns in 1 round. I got forcibly charm chained due to simply using its 2 turns to charm 2 of my units. My team was not able to one-shot these priority enemies safely, and also naturally had to get closer to even attempt to attack. In round 2, my team was fully charmed perpetually. Elite variants of normal enemies that get to spam a strong move tend to showcase why those moves should be limited in usage once per turn. This limitation is already on the player's cats, this rule should be considered for the enemy as well. I've also had a battle where new permanent unbreakable terrain occurred in the middle of battle and effectively caused one of my cats to be stuck there, as they didn't have a diagonal movement nor a blink to get out of their newfound box. There was no exclamation mark tile indicator prior, nor was there a way to break free. Speaking of being trapped, it is possible to have junk spawn and cage your cats off the start, and while most junk can be broken down unlike the previous point, wasting a turn to terrain again is unfun, even if this time was temporary. Now, what happens to cats that can't pop a tire or hit what's adjacent to them? The later areas also have enemies with more insta-kills being commonplace, with them typically being, if in range, insta-kill, which usually just means have some range or ways to manipulate the enemy pathing to not get in range. However, bosses or elites get to move more than once in a round, so sometimes they will just reach some unfortunate cat who is slower or stunned in the moment. Because this is a critique on variety, I wish some things that would incentivize or have a chance of counterplay, such as the edibility of some cats affected these type of things, like how a cat could be so abrasive and hard to swallow that they could not get insta-killed by an attack that requires the enemy to eat and swallow the cat. Or maybe I'm just salty that my 90 armored cat just died from the boss having 3 turns in one round go across the entire map and eat him. I can't imagine this being fun for solo runs. In the Act 3 stage, The Future, the enemy with the sign that not only takes away a choice for each turn is global and affects all your cats at once. On top of this, they are properly placed away from your starting position. They are generally difficult to reach conveniently. If they ever end up being the last enemy on the field, they will now instantly one-turn doom your entire cast. If you don't have a way of removing doom or defeating the sign in that very same turn, you're wiped. Now imagine if there's more than 3 of them. I also want every single stem cat to be completely removed, or at least have a limited cap. If you do not have a cat that can easily one-shot them or a global insta-win button on hand, you get put into purgatory. My last one I wouldn't call a positive or a negative. To be honest, I have the same feeling that I do with Fire Emblem Engage. The gameplay can be peak, while the story is something you ignore because it clearly does not put the effort to make its narrative and storytelling feel something important and worthwhile to get immersed in. What I will say despite this is that it really feels like someone got forced into Catholicism with such a toxic Iron Fist environment to be raised in, which then birthed a cycle of unfairness back to the world. For transparency of potential bias, I am myself religious, but more of a Protestant Christian. I also think Catholicism is an awful way to get to know God's love. Maybe that's why the imagery in the endgame song lyrics speak so awful to me, but something tells me it's more of a throwaway usage of fantasy tropes just to bash on a previous hurt. So if anything, I just hope that whoever I sense was hurt is showing it through the game, that they'll find solace without perpetuating the cycle. After all that's said and done, I do actually love the game even when it feels like the bullshit that happens makes me want to tear my own dick off. I don't think I've felt as much frustration and futility in trying to enjoy something for the genre, and that sentiment used to be for Darkest Dungeon, and yet it is indeed enticing and enjoyable of a game, before it pulls the rug from underneath you. I mean this in the nice way possible. Fuck you, brackets affectionately, Edmund McMillan. Your game makes me want to keep myself safe. I hope the patches all the way to the Tease DLC will make it even better.
I'm in the drive-thru at Burger King.
Can I pick it up? Why don't you know what I didn't ring? I'm picking it so I can get a drink.
Trigger everyone to autism with that.
Can I pick it up? Can I pick it up?
He just got up and left.
Drip, drip.
If I see a side of cheese of a trip, I'll sit on your foot.
Dip.
So you got my double, my
Oh, I didn't forget that.